I never imagined I'd be one of those people, those who sit on Reddit, typing up their story, looking for validation or answers. But here I am, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet because I don't know where else to turn. It all started innocently enough, or at least I thought it did. My wife and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but whose is, right? We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I always believed we were solid. We communicated, we laughed together, and we supported each other through life's curveballs. But I guess I was wrong. I'd been noticing little changes in her behavior for a while, things that, at first, I brushed off. She was working later than usual, always claiming there was some new project at work that needed her full attention. She started being more secretive with her phone, tilting the screen away from me whenever she got a message. But whenever I asked her about it, she'd just roll her eyes and say I was being paranoid. You know how demanding my job is, she'd say with that casual smile, brushing me off like it was no big deal. And maybe it wasn't at first. I didn't want to be the kind of guy who micromanaged his wife's every move, constantly questioning her every decision. I trusted her. That's what marriage is built on, right? Trust. But as the months went on, the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach started to grow, and I couldn't shake it. One night, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. I know, huge violation of privacy. I felt sick to my stomach as I swiped through her texts, part of me hoping I wouldn't find anything and part of me terrified of what I might see. And that's when I saw it. A string of messages from a guy named T. I had no idea who he was, but the texts weren't exactly work-related. They were flirty, way too friendly, and full of inside jokes I had no part in. My heart raced as I scrolled further up the thread, hoping it was all just a misunderstanding. But then I saw the photos, nothing explicit, but intimate enough to make my stomach churn. Pictures of them together at a restaurant, arms around each other. Photos of her at work, selfies with that stupid T smiley face she'd send him after each one. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen in disbelief. It felt like my world had just collapsed in on itself. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, shared everything with, was lying to me. She had been for God knows how long. When she came out of the shower, I couldn't even look at her. I felt numb, like I was outside my own body, watching this whole mess unfold from a distance. "Babe? You okay?" she asked, toweling off her hair like everything was normal, like my heart wasn't in pieces on the floor. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was tight, and I knew if I tried to speak, I'd either scream or burst into tears, neither of which I wanted to do right then. So I just shoved her phone into her hands, opened to the conversation with T, and waited for her reaction. Her face went pale. She stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity before finally meeting my eyes. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice shaky. "Really?" I finally managed to croak out. "Because it looks like you've been sneaking around with some guy behind my back." "It's not like that," she protested, her eyes wide with panic. "He's just a friend. We've been hanging out because I've been so stressed with work, and..." "Cut the crap," I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "I'm not an idiot. You don't hang out with a friend like this. This is an affair, and you know it." She stood there, frozen, as tears started to well up in her eyes. But I wasn't about to let her play the victim. Not after everything I'd just seen. "I trusted you," I said, my voice cracking. "I thought we were happy. But clearly, I was wrong." She didn't say anything for a long time. Just stood there, looking at me like she didn't know what to do or say. And honestly, neither did I. A part of me wanted to throw her out, tell her to pack her things and leave. But another part of me, God help me, still loved her. Still wanted to believe that maybe, somehow, this could all be fixed. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. "I never wanted to hurt you. But it was too late for that." That night was a blur of emotions: anger, confusion, heartbreak. I didn't say anything else after she apologized. What was there to say? I just walked out of the room and sat in the living room, staring at nothing, trying to wrap my head around everything. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her phone, saw those messages, saw the pictures of them together. I spent the next day in a daze, barely functioning at work. Every time someone asked me if I was okay, I just nodded, forcing a smile that I knew didn't reach my eyes. All I wanted to do was go home and confront her again, demand answers, but I didn't even know where to start. When I finally got home that evening, she was waiting for me. I could tell she had been crying, her eyes were red and puffy, and she looked exhausted. But I wasn't in the mood to comfort her. Not after everything. "We need to talk," she said as soon as I walked in the door. "No kidding," I muttered, tossing my keys on the counter and heading straight for the kitchen. I poured myself a drink, not bothering to offer her one. She followed me, wringing her hands nervously. "Please, just let me explain." I took a long sip of my drink before turning to face her. "Explain what? That you've been sneaking around behind my back with some guy? That you've been lying to me for who knows how long? Go ahead, I'm all ears." She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. She deserved to feel bad. She deserved to feel every ounce of pain she had put me through. "It's not what you think," she said again, her voice shaky. "Yes, I've been seeing him, but it wasn't." "Wasn't what? An affair?" "Because that's exactly what it looks like." "I never slept with him," she blurted out, her eyes wide with desperation. "I swear, it never went that far. We talked, we hung out, but I never." "And that makes it better somehow?" I snapped, cutting her off. "You think because you didn't sleep with him, it's not cheating? You were hiding this from me, lying to me. That's betrayal, plain and simple." She looked down, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't want to hurt you." "But you did," I said coldly. "You hurt me in ways I can't even begin to describe." We stood there in silence for what felt like forever, the weight of everything pressing down on us. I wanted to yell, to scream, to break something just to release all the anger building up inside me. But instead, I just stood there, feeling numb. "I love you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never stopped loving you. I was just lost, and he was there for me when I felt like I couldn't talk to you." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I had always thought we were open with each other, that if something was bothering her, she'd come to me. But hearing that she felt like she couldn't, that she had turned to someone else instead, made me feel like a failure. Like I wasn't enough. "So what now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "You think we can just go back to how things were? Pretend like none of this ever happened?" She shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her face. "No, I know we can't. I know I messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want to try. I want to fix this, if you'll let me." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to think that maybe, somehow, we could work through this. But another part of me, maybe the more realistic part, knew that things would never be the same again. Once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild. "I need time," I said finally, setting my glass down on the counter. "I need space to figure out what I want, because right now, I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She nodded, her face crumpling with emotion. "I understand. Take as much time as you need." And with that, I walked out of the kitchen, heading for the spare room where I'd been sleeping since the night before. I could hear her crying softly behind me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I needed to distance myself from her, from everything, just to clear my head. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work, trying to avoid being at home as much as possible. I couldn't stand being around her, seeing her face and being reminded of what she had done. Every time I looked at her, all I saw was betrayal. But no matter how hard I tried to escape it, the pain followed me everywhere. It was like a dark cloud hanging over my head, suffocating me. We barely spoke to each other during that time. She stayed in the guest room, giving me the space I had asked for, but it didn't make things any easier. If anything, the silence between us only made things worse. It gave me too much time to think, to replay everything in my mind, over and over again. I started going to the gym after work, staying out later than usual just to avoid coming home. I knew I was avoiding the issue, but I wasn't ready to face it yet. I wasn't ready to confront the fact that my marriage might be over. One night, after an especially long day at work, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, waiting for me. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days, and for the first time in a while, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was hurting too, even if she was the one who had caused all of this. "We need to talk," she said quietly, her voice hoarse from crying. "I know," I replied, sitting down across from her. "But I don't know what to say. I don't know how to fix this." She looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "I don't know either. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes, if you'll give me a chance." I sat there in silence, staring at her, trying to figure out if I even had anything left to give. Was there still something between us, or was I just clinging to the ghost of what our relationship used to be? The truth was, I didn't know. I felt so lost in all of this. "I don't even know where to start," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do you expect me to just get over this?" She shook her head, wiping at her eyes. "I don't. I know I can't ask you to just move on like nothing happened. I know it's going to take time, and maybe you'll never be able to forgive me. But I need you to know that I'm committed to trying. I love you, and I want to fix this." There it was again. That word, love. It used to mean everything to me, but now, it just felt hollow. How could she say she loved me when she had been so careless with my heart? "Love isn't enough," I said, rubbing my temples. "You don't just get to throw that word around and expect everything to be okay. You broke my trust, and I don't know if I can ever get that back." She didn't argue. She just sat there, looking defeated. For a moment, I felt a flicker of guilt, like maybe I was being too harsh. But then I remembered those texts, those pictures, and any sympathy I had vanished. "I know," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild that trust. I'll go to therapy, I'll cut off contact with him completely, whatever you need." I raised an eyebrow. "You haven't already cut him off?" She flinched at my words, shaking her head. "I haven't talked to him since you found out, but I didn't officially end it. I wanted to wait until we talked, to figure out what you wanted." "Jesus," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "So you're telling me he's just sitting there, waiting, thinking you two are still a thing?" "No, it's not like that," she said quickly. "I told him I needed space, that things with you were complicated. He knows it's over." I didn't know whether to believe her or not, and that's what hurt the most. I didn't trust her anymore, not even with something as simple as ending a relationship with this guy. The guy who had stolen my wife's attention, her affection, and, in a way, her love. "I want you to block him," I said firmly, my voice hardening. "No more messages, no more space, no more anything. I don't want him anywhere near our lives." She nodded quickly. "Okay. I'll block him. Right now, if that's what you want." Without another word, she pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found his name. For a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of his contact photo, some smiling, smug-looking guy who looked way too comfortable in my wife's phone. She hesitated for a second, her finger hovering over the block button, but then she pressed it. I watched as she deleted his number entirely, and for a moment, I felt a tiny spark of relief. But it didn't last. "Happy now?" she asked, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Not really," I said honestly. "Blocking him doesn't change what happened." She sighed, slumping back on the couch. "I know. But it's a start, right? It's something." "Maybe," I muttered, leaning back in my chair. "But I don't know if it's enough." The truth was, I didn't know what enough even looked like anymore. Blocking this guy, going to therapy, trying to fix things, it all felt like band-aids on a much deeper wound. And as much as I wanted to believe that we could somehow get past this, a part of me knew that things would never be the same. Over the next few days, she kept her word. She blocked him, started going to therapy on her own, and even suggested couples counseling. I agreed to it, more out of obligation than any real hope that it would help. I didn't want to be the bad guy, the one who refused to try. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were just delaying the inevitable. Our first therapy session was awkward, to say the least. We sat in the waiting room, avoiding each other's eyes, both of us pretending to be absorbed in our phones. When the therapist finally called us in, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. I had no idea what to expect, and part of me didn't even want to be there. The therapist was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a soothing voice. She greeted us warmly, asking us to take a seat on the couch across from her. My wife sat down first, and I reluctantly followed, keeping a small distance between us. "So, tell me why you're here," the therapist said gently, looking between the two of us. I glanced at my wife, unsure of who was supposed to start. After a few seconds of silence, she spoke up. "We're here because I messed up," she said, her voice shaky. I had an emotional affair, and it's broken our trust. I want to fix things, but I don't know how." The therapist nodded, her expression thoughtful. Emotional affairs can be incredibly damaging, sometimes even more so than physical ones. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once it's broken, it can be very difficult to rebuild. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, feeling the weight of her words. That was exactly how I felt, like the foundation of our relationship had crumbled beneath us, and I didn't know if we could ever put it back together. "What's your perspective on all this?" the therapist asked, turning to me. I hesitated, not sure how to put my feelings into words. "I feel betrayed," I said slowly. "I trusted her, and she went behind my back. I don't know how to move past that." The therapist nodded again, her eyes softening. "That's completely understandable. Betrayal is a deep wound, and it's normal to feel like you're not sure how to heal from it. But healing is possible, if both of you are committed to the process." I wasn't sure if I believed that. But I also wasn't ready to give up entirely. Not yet. Therapy continued for a few weeks, and while it was helping us talk through some things, the process was painfully slow. Every session felt like peeling back layers of an onion, but instead of getting to something better underneath, all I found was more hurt. More questions I didn't want to ask but couldn't stop thinking about. Every time we sat in that therapist's office, I felt like we were walking in circles. My wife would talk about how she felt disconnected from me, how she didn't know how to reach out to me, and that's why she turned to someone else. And every time she said that, I felt this deep rage simmering inside me. Like, I was right here. I was always right here, willing to talk, willing to listen, and she chose to go to some other guy instead. But I kept quiet. I was trying to be the bigger person, or whatever the hell that meant in this situation. I was trying to let therapy do its job. The thing is, no matter how many words we threw around in those sessions, nothing felt like it was actually changing between us. It was like slapping a coat of paint on a wall that was already crumbling. Meanwhile, things at home were still painfully awkward. We still didn't sleep in the same room, and most nights we barely talked unless it was about therapy. She would cook dinner or do little things to try to make up for everything, but I just wasn't in a place to appreciate it. I couldn't even look at her without feeling this wave of sadness and betrayal wash over me. It wasn't anger anymore, it was exhaustion. I was tired of pretending like this could be fixed. Then one night, everything came crashing down again. I was in the kitchen, making myself a snack before bed, when her phone buzzed on the counter. She wasn't around, and out of habit, I glanced at the screen. And there it was, a message from a number I didn't recognize. I shouldn't have, but I picked it up and unlocked it. The message read, "I miss you." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My hands started shaking as I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Who the hell was this? I scrolled up in the conversation, and while most of it seemed innocent, just small talk and random chatter, there was enough there to make my blood run cold. This wasn't the same guy from before. It was someone new. Someone she had been talking to while we were supposed to be fixing things. The front door opened, and I quickly put her phone back down on the counter, pretending like nothing had happened. She walked in, smiling softly when she saw me, but I couldn't even look at her. My chest was tight with anger, and I knew I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice low and steady. She froze, her smile fading instantly. "What are you talking about? Who's the guy you've been texting?" I snapped, crossing my arms. "The one who misses you?" Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. That was all the confirmation I needed. "Unbelievable," I muttered, shaking my head. "We've been going to therapy, trying to fix this, and you're still out here talking to someone else? How many more times are you going to do this to me?" "I can explain," she said, her voice shaking. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "I'm so tired of hearing that. It's always not what I think, but it's exactly what it looks like every damn time." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I had been down this road before. She had played the victim, said all the right things, but nothing had changed. She was still lying, still betraying me. "I didn't do anything with him," she said, her voice cracking. "We were just talking, that's all. I was feeling lonely, and..." "Lonely?" I repeated, my voice rising. "We're in therapy. We're literally trying to work through this, and you're feeling lonely? How do you think I feel?" She looked down, tears streaming down her face. "I know, I messed up again. I'm so sorry. I was stupid, and I should have never started talking to him. But I swear, it didn't go anywhere. I stopped it before it could. I didn't care anymore." Her apologies meant nothing to me. She had already broken my trust, and now she was doing it again. Therapy wasn't working, and neither was this relationship. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice flat. "I'm done." She looked up at me, panic flashing across her face. "No, please don't say that. We can still fix this. I'll stop talking to him, I'll do whatever it takes." "I don't believe you," I said, cutting her off. "You keep saying you'll do whatever it takes, but you never actually follow through. I've given you chance after chance, and every time, you throw it away." "I'm sorry," she sobbed, stepping closer to me. "I love you, I don't want to lose you. Please, just give me one more chance." "I've given you enough chances," I said, stepping back. "You don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't keep doing this." She reached out for me, but I pulled away, shaking my head. "We're done." For a moment, she just stood there, staring at me like she couldn't believe what was happening. But I wasn't going to change my mind. I couldn't. I had spent too long trying to fix something that was beyond repair, and I wasn't going to let her drag me down any further. "I'll pack my things tomorrow," I said, turning away from her. "I'm leaving." That night was one of the longest I've ever experienced. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind was racing, thinking about everything that had happened, everything we had been through, and how it had all come to this. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of her crying from the other side of the house. I knew I had made the right decision, but that didn't make it any easier. Walking away from something that had been a huge part of my life for so many years was gut-wrenching, no matter how broken it had become. The next morning, I got up early, before she even woke up. I packed my things quickly, shoving clothes into a duffel bag, grabbing my essentials. I didn't need much. Honestly, I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. As I zipped up my bag, I glanced around the room one last time. It felt strange, knowing that I'd never sleep here again, that this place, this life, was no longer mine. There was a sense of finality that hit me like a ton of bricks. I was really doing this. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I passed the master bedroom, I saw her curled up on the bed, clutching a pillow, her eyes swollen from crying. She didn't say anything when she saw me, but the look in her eyes said everything. "Are you really leaving?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. I nodded, keeping my expression as neutral as possible. "I have to." She sat up, hugging the pillow to her chest. "I know I messed up, but please, just don't go. We can still figure this out. I'll do anything. I swear. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I knew if I started talking, I'd end up in the same cycle of excuses, promises, and more broken trust. Instead, I turned and walked out the door, my heart heavy. As I got into my car and drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't stay trapped in that toxic cycle any longer. She had already taken so much from me, and I wasn't about to let her take my sense of self too. For the first few days, I crashed at a friend's place, not really sure what my next move was. I didn't tell many people about what had happened yet, I wasn't ready to relive it. But eventually, I had to let my close friends and family know. The reactions were mixed. Some of them were shocked, unable to believe that the woman they thought they knew had been hiding so much. Others weren't all that surprised. They'd always seen signs that I had been too blind to notice. The way she would subtly put me down in front of others, or the distant way she acted when we were all together. I guess I had just brushed it off as normal couple stuff, but looking back, the cracks had been there for a while. My parents were supportive, though I could tell they were sad for me. My mom especially, who had always loved my wife and thought of her as the perfect daughter-in-law, was devastated when she found out about the infidelity. But she didn't press me for details, which I appreciated. For a while, I kept my head down and just focused on getting through each day. I went to work, hung out with friends when I could, and slowly started putting myself back together. Therapy became a lifeline for me, not couples therapy, but my own personal sessions. I needed to process everything, figure out how to move forward without carrying all that anger and resentment with me. And then, out of nowhere, she reached out again. It had been about a month since I left, and I had blocked her on everything, wanting a clean break. But somehow, she managed to get my new number. One afternoon, I got a text from her. It was simple, but it made my heart race. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave her in the past where she belonged. But another part of me was curious. What did she want now? Had she finally realized how much she had screwed up, or was this just another ploy to drag me back into her web? Against my better judgment, I texted back. About what? A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. "I miss you. I want to see you. Please, just one conversation." I had no idea why, but I agreed. Maybe I needed closure, or maybe I just wanted to see if she had really changed. Either way, we made plans to meet up at a coffee shop a few days later. The day of the meeting, I felt a weird sense of dread. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew I had to keep my guard up. This was the same person who had lied to me over and over again. There was no reason to think this time would be any different. When I arrived at the coffee shop, she was already there, sitting at a table by the window. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks for coming," she said softly as I sat down. I nodded, keeping my distance emotionally. "What do you want to talk about?" She took a deep breath, looking down at her hands. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realized how badly I messed up. I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to apologize for, and I hate myself for it. But I still love you, and I want to try again." I let her words hang in the air for a moment before responding. "We've been down this road before. You've said all of this already. Why should I believe anything's different this time?" She bit her lip, looking nervous. "Because I'm different. I've been going to therapy, working on myself. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one. I know you don't trust me right now, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn that trust back." I didn't say anything for a long time. I could see the pain in her eyes, the regret. But that didn't erase everything that had happened. Trust wasn't something you could just rebuild with words. "I don't know," I finally said, my voice heavy. "I don't think I can go through all of that again. You broke me, and I'm still picking up the pieces. I'm not sure there's anything left to salvage." She flinched at my words, and for a moment, I thought she was going to break down right there in the coffee shop. But she held it together, blinking away the tears that had started to pool in her eyes. "I understand," she said quietly. "I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you. But I can't just walk away without at least trying. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I just want a chance to prove that I've changed." I leaned back in my chair, staring at her. Part of me wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that people could change, that all the work she claimed to be doing on herself meant something. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt over and over again, was screaming that this was just another manipulation. "How do I even know you're telling the truth?" I asked, my voice flat. "You've lied to me so many times, it's hard to believe anything you say anymore." She looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "I guess you don't. Not yet, anyway. But I'm willing to take things slow, to show you over time that I'm serious. I know I don't deserve your trust right now, but I'm hoping I can earn it back little by little." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Look, I'm not going to pretend like I don't still care about you. But that doesn't mean I'm ready to just jump back into this. You hurt me in ways I didn't even know were possible, and I'm still dealing with that. Even if you've changed, I'm not sure I can ever see you the same way again." Her shoulders slumped, and she nodded slowly. "I get it. I do. I just want you to know that I'm here if you ever change your mind. I'll keep working on myself, whether we're together or not, because I know I need to. But if you ever decide you want to try again, I'll be waiting." I didn't know what to say to that. I appreciated that she wasn't pushing me to make a decision right then and there, but the whole situation was still so complicated. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to give her the chance to prove herself. After a few minutes of awkward silence, I stood up. "I need some time to think about all of this. I can't make any promises, but I'll let you know when I figure things out." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with hope and regret. "Thank you. That's all I can ask for." As I left the coffee shop, I felt this strange mixture of relief and frustration. I had gotten the closure I needed, but at the same time, I felt like I was right back where I started, unsure of what to do next. Over the next few weeks, I tried to focus on myself. I kept going to therapy, working through the hurt and betrayal, trying to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like I was finally moving on, and other days when I found myself replaying every conversation, every argument, every moment that led to our downfall. She would text me occasionally, just to check in, but I kept my distance. I wasn't ready to dive back into that mess, even though a part of me missed her. I missed the good times, the moments when things felt easy between us, before everything fell apart. But then something happened that changed everything. I was at work one afternoon when I got a call from a mutual friend of ours. She sounded frantic, her voice shaky as she told me that my ex-wife, I guess, had been in an accident. A car crash. She was in the hospital, and it didn't look good. My heart dropped. I left work immediately, rushing to the hospital without even thinking. When I got there, I was met by the same friend who had called me, her face pale and worried. She told me that my wife had been unconscious since the crash, and the doctors weren't sure if she would wake up. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. Despite everything, despite all the anger and betrayal, I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to lose her completely. For the next few days, I spent hours at the hospital, sitting by her bedside, waiting for some sign that she would pull through. I couldn't help but think about all the things I hadn't said, all the unfinished conversations, all the unresolved feelings. I had been so focused on the hurt that I had forgotten how much she meant to me, even after everything. Then one morning, after what felt like an eternity, she woke up. It was slow at first, just a flicker of her eyelids, a soft groan, but it was enough to fill me with hope. The doctors said it was a good sign, that she was on the road to recovery, but it would take time. When she was finally able to talk, the first thing she said to me was, "I thought you weren't going to come." I smiled, though it felt bittersweet. "I wasn't going to leave you like that. Not after everything." She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Over the next few weeks, I visited her regularly as she recovered. It was strange, spending so much time with her again, but in a different context. We weren't trying to fix our relationship anymore, we were just two people who had been through something traumatic, trying to figure out what came next. Eventually, she was well enough to go home. I helped her get settled, but we both knew things weren't the same. We had reached a point where we could be civil, where the anger had faded, but the damage was still there. We couldn't pretend like everything was fine, but we also couldn't ignore the fact that we still cared about each other. One evening, as I was about to leave her place, she stopped me at the door. "I don't know what happens next," she said quietly, "but I want you to know that I'm grateful you were there for me. Even if we never get back together, I'll always appreciate that." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I care about you. I always will. But I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were." She smiled sadly. "I know. And maybe that's for the best." As I walked away from her house that night, I realized that this was the closure I had been searching for. We weren't going to fix things. We weren't going to get back together. But we had found a way to move on, to let go of the past without letting it define us.